Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Startup Central right here on ET Now with me, Sumita. Kareer. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll take you through the top stories that we're tracking from the world of startups, entrepreneurships, and technology. In fact, today on the show, we put the spotlight on sustainable home essentials brand EcoSoul Home, which has raised $20 million in a funding round that was led by Axel and Bajaj Financial Securities. The Series B funding round, which is a mix of equity and debt financing, also saw Mohandas Pai startup Exceed Ventures, JSW Ventures, a CK Birla Group, and venture debt was secured from Ulterior Capital and SIDBI. But how does the company plan to use the newly minted funds? Well, we will be joining in just a short while with Rahul, Singh, the company's co-founder. But before we go on to that chat, let's take a quick look at the headlines we're tracking here on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on Startup Central. First things first, on the fundraise, how are you looking at allocating this capital to accelerate EcoSoul's global expansion?
No, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the show and be able to share our story. So we have raised $20 million, and there are three main focus areas that we have. We are already present in 11 countries. So essentially, we are now, this is going to really present us an opportunity to fund our expansion, more so into Europe and the GCC area. So in Europe, we're already in UK and Germany. With this fundraise, we're going to expand into France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And within GCC, we are already in UAE, and Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain are the target markets that we're expanding into. So that's one level of expansion that we're going to fund through fundraise. The second expansion that we are going to fund from here is essentially we are entering new categories as we look at 2026 roadmap. So we are definitely getting into the baby and the healthcare space, and also getting into home cleaning space, right? So essentially when we think eco-friendly and we are a sustainable products company, and we look at the pollution that is happening in our rivers, and you see all the foam that happens in Yamuna River in Delhi, right? It's all because of the detergents, right? So EcoSoul has also taken up not only war against plastics, we are also going to take a war against detergents, right? So second expansion is going to fuel through that. And the third expansion that we are fueling over the next couple of years is essentially expansion of our manufacturing facilities in India. So good to know that 75% of our revenues comes from outside of India. Only 25% revenue comes from India. And the products that we export across the world in EcoSoul brand, they're all made in India, right? So essentially, as we fuel the expansion, we'll continue to fuel the expansion for manufacturing facilities in India as well. So these are the main focus areas that we're going to focus on once now since we have the funds.
Right, Rahul. So very interesting couple of points that you have mentioned. We're going to be touching upon some of them over the course of this discussion, including your expansion of manufacturing facilities, the fact that 75% of your revenue comes from outside of India from those markets. And of course, you're focused on 11 markets. But Rahul, let me understand a bit more about your company. You're into the business of sustainable manufacturing, into sustainable products. Give us a sense of your business model, the categories that you're currently operating in, and why are these international markets a great opportunity for your company versus the Indian market?
So when we started building the company, right, we were and I know there are some tremendous brands that have been built in India. Some of the founders are our friends, right? So essentially, but when we build, typically any founder who takes a thesis of building a brand in India, they actually have an India first approach, right? If you think that EcoSoul's journey, we actually took it the other way around, where we actually started designing products for the global market and then eventually brought it to India, right? So essentially our first actual market launch was United States, and then we expanded to Canada, Mexico, UK, Germany, and then India and GCC. So we have a outwards in approach first, right? And that has helped us really truly develop products that are of global standards, right? So essentially, very happy to say that, we are in 12,000 stores worldwide, and no brand, Indian brand before us has been able to achieve that, where you will find us on the shelves of Walmarts and the Costco's and the Targets and the Waitrose and the Carrefours of the world, right? So essentially, we take a lot of pride in that. We also take a lot of pride in that because no sustainable brand in the world has been able to achieve it before us, whether it's an Indian brand or a Chinese or a Thai or Vietnamese brand, right? So essentially, no Asian brand has been able to achieve scale across all these retail channels and the e-commerce platforms before us. So I think we take a lot of pride in the prowess of Made in India.
Right, Rahul. So you mentioned essentially that you have 12,000 stores worldwide. You're currently operational in 11 markets across Europe and, of course, the United States. But give us a sense of the kind of revenues that you're getting from each of these markets, and how big is India as far as your, overall business is concerned in terms of revenue, and what is your outlook, especially for the India market? Are you looking at expanding substantially in the India market? What kind of investments are you putting in domestically versus these global markets?
No, I think that's a great question, right? So essentially, today around 60% of our revenue comes from North America, which basically all United States, Canada, and Mexico combined. Around 10 to 15% of our revenue comes from Europe. 25% of our revenue comes from India, and rest from the GCC market. So if I think about it from a geographical standpoint, India is our second largest market, and we are very new in India, right? We launched in India in December 2023, early 2024, right? Whereas we started in US in 2021. So if India market today is almost half of the US market, so we are very bullish on India. And one of the reasons why, we became very bullish on India is that we are really good at underestimating the consumer appetite in India, right? So we always think it's outside in first. But India really surprised us. And we believe that over the period of next couple of years, India will be half of our revenue. So I think we are very, very bullish on India.
Okay. So you're bullish on India, and your story essentially is definitely of a startup that is homegrown but is catering to the world, made in India but making for the world. And we'll come to that in just a bit, Rahul. But how do you differentiate EcoSoul Home's products in a crowded and rapidly growing sustainable products market, given that larger brands are also entering this space rather fast?
Absolutely. And the reason why we are not worried about that is because we have been competing against a much larger and tougher competitor, and that is single-use plastics, right? So single-use plastic is a 50-year-old industry. It's a $200 billion a year industry, so it's pretty large, right? We are not even a speck of dust in the overall scheme of things. It's an industry that is more than 50 years old, right? So it's a very established industry, and there are global giants like Hefty, Glad, Dixie, Solo, right? So there are very, very established players. We still took the mantle of introducing sustainable products to the US and the European shelves, and we received extreme, surprising consumer love. Even on the online channels today, 55% of our sales comes from repeat revenue from the repeat customers. So why we are not worried about the competition is that our approach is very simple: design products with consumer in mind, make sure that the product is affordable, and ensure that the quality consistency is absolutely great, right? When you do these three things, you gain consumers' trust. And once you have consumers' trust, I think that's how the brands first get built and then they thrive, right?
Right.
So we're not worried about that.
Right, and that's essentially how you've established to expand your presence globally, Rahul, if it weren't for consumer brand trust. But how do you balance offering premium sustainable products while at the same time keeping prices affordable for a broad customer base? And how are your pricing strategies for the India market differ from the other markets where you operate in?
So India is a very value-centric market, right? And again, I'm very carefully choosing the word value-centric than price-centric, right? So think about this, right? Today, we are pretty much the only brand which is available across Amazon, Flipkart, Zepto, Blinkit, BB Now, right? So essentially, and we have gained close to 50% market share of India in a very, very short time, right? And I would say three things, right? So one, from a cost perspective, our competitiveness comes from made in India strategy, right? We are vertically integrated all the way to the raw materials, right? So that's one thing that truly helped us. The second, I would say, is that from India perspective specifically, right? We were the first company to introduce food grade disposable products in the market, and where we very blatantly call it out as well. This is food grade, right? Not many consumers are actually aware that they are eating in just something which might not be food grade and it touches their food. And the third thing is we never compromise on quality, right? So we never produce flimsy products. The products that are available in Indian market are exact same product that will be available in the UK market or the US market, right? When we did three things, we very quickly discovered that the consumers are really willing to pay for quality, right? But doing all of that, we are still within 10 to 15% of plastics, right? And that is the secret sauce is our integrated, vertical integrated manufacturing. So I think all of this put together, it gives us a very good competitive moat in really winning the consumer's heart.
Right, Rahul. And how do you see the market for sustainable home essentials globally in India evolving within the next 3 to 5 years? If you could talk about each of these markets.
So I'll be very frank, right? 5 years back when we started, nobody even thought that sustainability could be a big market and there could be unicorns and unicorns coming out of this category, right? We took a chance, right? We took a bet on the fact that number one, consumers hate single-use plastic, governments hate single-use plastic, regulators hate single-use plastic, and it still gets consumed, so there must be something wrong, right? So we see that the sustainable revolution is just picking up, right? If you think about global sustainable products consumption is really less than 5% of the total disposables or home essentials products consumption. So we're just picking it up, right? The moment it reaches even 10 or 15%, we are talking about a multi-billion dollar, $50 to $100 billion market, right? So I think we're not worried about from the demand side perspective. It's a massive market where the consumer sentiment and the consumer trends are just picking up. That's our thesis. And over the past 5 years, we have consistently seen that happening.
Right. Just one final question, Rahul, before we let you go. If you could share your growth projections for the India market over the next 2 years versus the other markets, the GCCs and the European and the US markets where you operate. You stated that the US market at the moment accounts for 60% of your revenues. Is that going to, be your focus and your priority markets globally, the US markets? And how are you looking at investments, particularly in each of these three geographies?
Again, great question, right? So essentially, US continues to remain one of the most important markets for us, right? And essentially, it will continue to grow at upwards of 50%, right? We do see the European and the Indian growth coming up really, really well. So essentially, we are expanding. We grew 400% last year in India, for example, right? And we are just picking it up in India. So we are expanding between 200 and 400% in India this year as well. So that's the projections that we have for India. The European sales, since the base is small for us, so it will be 300 to 400% this year with the Europe. Good news is we have a UK free trade agreement and we have a European free trade agreement, which is on the way, right? All of these trends actually help us. So very, very focused on the European and the Indian markets this year.